I just want to say, I want to start by saying thank you so much for being, a guest on the Front Row Dad podcast in your own studio.
Well, it worked out really well, so trading shows.
Have you been like on the other side of the table here in this studio before, or is this a first?
I did one show one time here, and that was it. So this is number 2.
All right,
it's been a while.
I'm excited about it. Do you like this, being interviewed? Do you like?
Yeah, it's easier than interviewing. I don't know if you feel that way, but I like being interviewed. Like, it's less pressure to be interviewed than it is to interview, because I don't have to control the show and be like, oh, people like this. It's like I just talk about myself for an hour.
Yeah.
Easy.
When you think about the times that you have been interviewed, who is an excellent interviewer and what made him so great? I'd like to know what I should be aiming for today.
Graham Stephan has a huge podcast, Iced Coffee Hour, I think it's called. It's the biggest show I've ever been on. Graham is a phenomenal interviewer, and he gets just massive guests. And I don't know what makes him so good, other than that I think he's just darn curious. Like, he just actually cares. I think the best podcasts are ones where people actually care about what they're talking about, versus like, here's the 9 questions that I wrote down ahead of time that I ask every single guest, the same 9 questions, and I don't actually care about what you say.
Yeah.
But Graham's just curious about it.
Yeah. Well, you are loved by many in my world. And I just want to say it's really great to be able to spend a little time with you, because I've been hearing Justin and Qasim and other people that are fans of yours, that are friends of yours. They've really talked about who you are at your core. And I love that. I love when people are like, man, you've got to spend some time with Brandon. And I also love the compliment of like, he's just a good dude. Never mind the 6 books and 1 million copies and 1,000 or so people that you're serving through Better Life Tribe, all the profits being donated. Lots of people know you through BiggerPockets, and over 100 million downloads. From your work with that show. There's just so much, and then you're this incredible family man, and you're this you're a dynamic person. My experience, this dynamic person, which leaves a lot of room for questions of like, okay, how do we get here? How is all this possible? And that's really what I wanted to talk about today, because I find myself, even though I'm surrounded by, fortunately, some really incredible people, I still look at your world and I'm like, how does he do it all, man? How does he? Even when we got here today to your studio, you were just hanging out really, but I would have thought you would have been like, hey, we got to go because time is wasting. But there was an ease about you, which still, and I'm not saying that every moment of every period of your life has been with great ease, but I'd love to learn more about that. So maybe if we could, Brandon, just launching into a little bit about, and I want to get to your childhood and your relationship to your dad, which I don't know much about. So I want to get to all that, but can you take me into your life right now as we sit here, and like, can you just give me a big picture of like, how are you doing all this? I realize that might not be the sexiest question. It might need to be a little more specific.
Never been asked it.
But how are you doing all this? It seems impossible.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is absolutely overwhelming to think what I have in my hands in some level, and what I'm controlling. It actually, like, I can't wrap my head around all of it. And when I start to go down that path, it actually causes a ton of anxiety. The only time I really get anxiety is when I start thinking about how much I have. I realized recently that anxiety is a lot like having a giant pile of bricks that you got to move across a room, and when you look at the whole pile, it's just like, oh my gosh. But if you just look at the brick, it's easy, right? Like, I just got to send an email, I just got to send a text, I got to have a meeting with somebody. It's just bricks. Everything's pretty light and easy, anybody can do it. So when you look at the giant pile, you're like, oh my gosh, this could crumble. Like am I really doing this? And now I just put like a house under contract, I'm about to move next month, and I'm like, oh, I gotta move now. But it's like, no, don't look at the pile, just look at the, like, what's the next step in front of you? So what do I do? So I have a real estate company that has 150-ish employees. We have about $1 billion, give or take, of real estate. I can talk about kind of some of the lessons in building that at some point later, but suffice it to say, I got really good people to run it. I built that company from the top down, which is something that almost nobody does, and I've never really heard taught very much, which is, and I kind of did it on accident, but I basically hired a CEO from day one, and then let them build up the business below it. And so I am I'm very trusting, and I love to give people stuff and then watch them build out of themselves. Right? I learned a lot from David Osborne, who lives there in Austin. He's a good buddy of mine, very successful and wealthy guy. But I thought that's how he operated businesses, was top down. And so he would hire just really good people and let them figure it out. So I never worked in the mailroom of Open Door Capital and then had to work my way up to the next level. I just, from day one, I was like, this is what the org chart looks like. I'm gonna hire the CEO, who ended up changing roles a couple times. I put a new person there at some point, but it was never I was never in the engine, right? So I've never been part of the engine of what I built. So Open Door Capital, that's a big chunk of it. The Better Life stuff, I built kind of the same way. I just hired a bunch of people. And there's some downsides of that, like you gotta be able to afford them, so you gotta make sure you have a business that makes money right away, or you can't afford to hire those people. All the things I've done. But at the end of the day, I mean, it didn't start that way, right? My dad's a meat cutter, mom did daycare, so I was broke when I got out of college. And I just built it very, very slowly. My wife and I did all of our work ourselves on our rental properties, and we just started acquiring nasty, ugly little houses. And you just keep adding on one at a time, and eventually you get the 13,000 doors.
One at a time.
One at a time.
You know, what's funny is I was with David 2 weeks ago, and his advice to me was, hire a CEO for front desk.
Yeah, you hire top down.
That was it. So,
but now it's the hardest thing in the world, though, and he'll admit that too.
Yes.
Hardest thing in the world to find the right people.
Very much so.
Yeah, both my CEOs, three of them? Maybe three of my CEOs right now, or COOs, I guess in some cases, were interns of mine.
Is that right?
So I'm a big believer in hiring from within.
Yeah.
And then promoting from within, so to speak. So my intern is now the CEO of Open Door Capital, running $1 billion, real estate empire. He's brilliant. The guy is absolutely brilliant.
You said something about trust, and I want to dig into that for a second. What's your relationship to trust?
I mean, I've never thought about this in this way, but trust and risk are kind of two sides of the same coin in my mind. So what I mean by that, I'm a pretty risky guy. Like, I'm good. I like taking risks, right? That's why I do real estate. That's why I do start a lot of businesses. And so trust is simply like hedging your bets or risking, right? So it's just a risk reward sort of scenario. So if I trust an employee to do a good job running a business, all I'm really doing is I'm just betting on that employee to do a good job. And so I reduce risk, or by doing my education, just like I would on an investment, or I increase my risk by not doing the right homework or not watching the investment close enough. So trust, I've never thought of that connection, but there's probably something there. That trust and risk are really the same thing. And the more I can trust something, the less risky it is. But nothing's risk-free, and nothing gets my full trust.
How about as like a family value, or like a personal value?
Yeah.
When you move through the world, in your home, in your business, are there principles that you're living by as it relates to trust, like trust but verify,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, trust but verify 1,000%. I would say a phrase that's been beat into me the last year over and over and over in multiple failures that I've had is delegate, don't abdicate. So I mean, that's been a really, really hard lesson to learn over and over and over. I mean, my whole life I've been doing that. But, and for those that are unfamiliar, like the idea of abdicating is like, I'm going to give you control of this and I want nothing of it. I'm not going to look at it, right? I'm out. And I hope that it's going to go well because I'm trusting you to do it. I've learned that, trust without verification, or trust without oversight, trust without vision and then involvement, it lets me down 8 times out of 10, and that's really hard. It's not like people are bad people either. It's just what I think something should be done and how something should be done usually doesn't get done the way that I want, and it's my own fault for not doing that because I abdicated. And I've learned I need to stop abdicating. I just do it constantly.
Yeah.
Because I just get busy. It goes to the question of like, how do I do everything? At the end of the day, it's like I can't do everything. I can't run all these stuff and be a good father and a good husband. It's really, really tough. And so I just have to trust people. But if you hire the wrong people or you don't watch them good enough, so I have moved all of my business over to like EOS. I don't know if you know EOS.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, from the book Traction, Gino Wickman. Everything's on that because that is a system of accountability, so that at least I can not abdicate, I can delegate, and then have a place once a week to have a meeting in which I know things are at least on track or off track. So that's been helpful.
When you think about your childhood, were you a trusting person as a kid?
100%. I mean, I still am. I always assume the best in every single person, and I assume they're always a good person going to do the right thing. Yeah. And I actually do think, I mean, it's not like I really think most people are good people who want to do the right thing. I think that a lot of people are incompetent though, and I don't mean that. Maybe I do mean it in a bad way. I think that people are lazy by nature. I think most people are lazy and will take the shorter way out of almost anything. And that's why it's so hard to find good employees and find good people to work with. It's because it's a 1 in 100 situation of somebody who's going to see the problem and then fix the problem without being asked to fix the problem.
Yeah. What was your relationship like with your dad? Kind of learning an example. How was he both?
Yeah, you know, my dad is the hardest working guy I know. I mean, meat cutter at a grocery store for 40, 45 years. Just a solid, hard-working dude. I mean, my entire life growing up. But here's what I love about that. My dad would work 6 days a week. He'd work 6 days a week because he'd always work that extra Sunday for the time and a half. Didn't make a lot of money, so that time and a half made a lot of difference. So we had 1 day off every single week. And during school, my entire childhood, every Thursday, he would go to school and take one of us 4 kids. We had 4 kids in the family, me and I have 3 siblings. And he would take us out to lunch, and we'd go to McDonald's and go to lunch and then come back. And I mean, like, so once a month each kid got to do it. And I never thought anything of it until this year, like the last few months I've been thinking about this, realizing my dad had 1 day off a week. And he worked these 9, 10, 12-hour days. He had 1 day off, and instead of working on his car or doing the things you would want to do on your 1 day off, he went and took the kids to school, like from school to go to McDonald's. We used to drive across the lake. We lived in Minnesota. And so it was my favorite thing in the world. He'd pick us up on one side of the lake for school, and then we would drive across the lake, over the ice. Over the ice? That's awesome. To get to McDonald's, and then we'd drive back. Wow. Just core memories as a kid that meant nothing. Or he'd actually sit down and just sit at lunch with us. He would do that, probably maybe half the time we go to McDonald's. He would just sit at the lunch table with me and all my friends. And I thought it was the coolest thing until kids made fun of me later in middle school for it. Like, why does your dad come to lunch? Oh, yeah. And then, then I got a little self-conscious about it. But now I just think of, like, what an amazing testament to, like, putting your family first. Instead of all of his dreams and goals and things that he could have pursued in life, he spent it with his family. So my dad, he's my hero in so many ways.
I love that. Is he still?
He is.
Here?
Yeah, he drives for the Amish. I love this. So he retires a few years ago from meat cutting, and I'm like, Dad, like my dad, in the evening, he's a typical Midwest father, right? So he gets off work, goes home, turns on the TV, watches the sports, eventually goes to bed. Pretty typical, I knew when he retired, and there's a lot of stats around this. When people retire, they die. And I remember just thinking, like, my dad's gonna sit on the couch 24 hours a day, watch TV, and then he's gonna die in 3 years. And I was so sad by that. And he retires and he sits on the couch probably for like a month, and he gets bored, and he goes and he starts driving the Amish around. Because apparently the Amish, they can't drive, but they can be driven. Yeah. That's a normal thing. So he is now a full-time, like 70-hour-a-week driver for the Amish. He's texting me last night. I live in Hawaii, he's in Minnesota. He's texting me last night. It's like 9:30 p.m. Hawaii time, which is what, 2 in the morning, 2:30, whatever in the morning in Minnesota. And he's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, what are you doing awake? He's like, I'm driving to Indiana. Got a bunch of Amish in the back seat. I'm like, you shouldn't be texting and driving, but good to hear from you, Dad. Yeah, anyway, now he drives for the Amish.
That's cool. Yeah. Does he like coming here and visiting?
He does, yeah. Once a year they come for a month, and they come hang out. We have a little, we give them a vehicle. We have a vehicle just for my parents, my in-laws. And my parents are still, they're still thriving. All growing up, we thought they were going to get a divorce. Every month we thought they were going to divorce. They fought a lot. They were just, again, typical Midwest family, like yelling at the TV and yelling at each other. And they're still together after, almost 40 years now.
Wow.
Actually, no, more than 40 years, because I'm almost 40. Geez, yeah, they've been together 45 years now. Crazy.
Are there moments that you catch yourself daddying and you're like, I've become my dad?
100%. What was the one the other day? I had one the other day and I was like, oh no, I'm my father. Oh shoot. There's the obvious, like, turning off the lights.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. And I even remind myself, like, they're LEDs. They're like 1 cent a year. Like, they don't cost anything. It's the principle of, like, the light has to be turned off. Yeah. There's definitely a bit of that. My parents were, my dad especially was loud, like, again, a yeller at the TV, like watching a Vikings game with my dad was very, very loud. And so I actually have gone the exact opposite way. I don't yell at the TV. I don't yell at anybody. I've never had a fight with my wife that was shouting. We've never shouted at each other either, because she's the same way. We never shouted or raised my voice in the history of my marriage. And that's in a reaction to my parents. I want to be the opposite, right? But I find myself saying the same words in maybe even a more cutting way than my dad would do. And so it's like, I think to myself, pat myself on the back, I don't yell at my wife. And I'm like, but I treat my wife worse than my dad treated my mom. And I'm like, that's a problem.
In what way do you think that you do that? Because I can say the same thing.
Yeah.
Raise my hand, yeah.
I'm a good arguer, and I can argue to anybody and make them feel they're wrong. And so, like, I can just here's all the reasons why you're wrong, honey, and I'll be in a very nice voice, and I can just tear her down to a point where, I'm a way better debater than my wife.
Yeah. I've had a moment where my kids were saying something to Tatiana, and I was like, don't talk to your mother that way, like I do.
Yeah, exactly. And I see it, I'm trying really hard, because my kids are 4 and almost 8, be 8 next week. 4 and 8. And they're in that phase, they watch everything I do, and they watch how I treat mom. And I notice when I say little things to her, or even I don't treat her with the respect she deserves. My kids don't treat her with the respect she deserves, So, like, I'm trying very, very hard to even go over the top a little bit in how I talk to my wife, because I never want them saying, well, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't treat mom that way.
Where do you think you're winning in marriage right now? What's going well? Or where would you pat yourself on the back and say that you're proud of yourself?
Yeah. I feel like I don't know if I'm struggling in my marriage. That's not a fair statement. We have a good marriage. I feel like I'm struggling as a husband in a lot of ways in my marriage. In that, like, I know you asked for the win. So maybe I'll pull that out of here. But it's how do I want to lead that? It's like, I'm so busy, and that's where I say, like, how do I do everything? I don't do it well. I struggle with balance quite a bit. I'm getting date nights in. I track my habits. That's a big thing that I teach, and that's a big part of the Better Life Tribe is we do a lot of habit tracking, very James Clear, Atomic Habits style stuff. And so I have a habit tracker where one of the items is, like, did I have no kid connection time with my wife? And that means 15 minutes without the kids. We're having a conversation. And every single morning I checked yesterday, and I put a little checkbox, did I have no kid connection time? So I'd say I'm winning in that. I would say 6 out of 7 days of the week, I'm getting at least 15 minutes of no kid connection time, and I'm getting 1 date night a weekend. So that's my win. Ironically, like, that's my goal for the quarter, was to have 75 no kid connection times. Yeah. I'm really stressed right now. But I'm doing that intentionality because I feel like I'm failing in so many areas. I feel like my mind is constantly trying to solve these really big problems in my businesses, like just overwhelmingly large problems. And I'm just like sitting at home, and she'll say things like, "Did you want chicken tonight for dinner?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really care. And she's like, "Well, I'm thinking about making steak." And I'm like, I really don't. I just need you to decide. Yeah. And then I'm like, wait, why am I treating her that way? Yeah. It's because I'm just so preoccupied with these problems. And I'm making her problem, which is what's for dinner, sound insignificant and stupid. So then she feels dumb for even asking me. And so I'm trying. That's one of the bigger failures right now is I'm taking work home way too much.
Yeah.
And it's affecting her, and she's pregnant now, and so like I don't know when this episode comes out, but hopefully I've announced it officially by then. But we're pregnant, and so that's exciting. So I'm saying this period of life I need to stop the heavy work.
Yeah.
Because because I have to, it's got to change.
I appreciate that vulnerability, man, that honesty. I really do. I feel very connected to you in these moments where, I'm really impressed again by all of what you've accomplished. But when somebody opens their heart and reveals like things that might be a struggle or an area of improvement, I really take that to heart and with a lot of respect. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
What do you ever feel like? Is there going to be a moment when there is enough for your business where, let me ask it differently. Like I know I'm guessing you love business.
Yeah.
Am I making an assumption there?
Yeah. No, it's super fun.
And I think it's so great. I think we're like little kids. We want to build the sandcastle just because we love to build.
Yes.
And I think that's wonderful, right? How do you decide when the building is taking away from your family or your marriage, or when those problems are so big, you're like, I don't want to deal with that. And I'm not assuming that, by the way, that should happen. I'm just saying, how do you wrestle with that?
Yeah.
How much is enough? When do I say no to my business?
Yeah. I do wrestle a lot with it, and I think that is healthy to wrestle, of course, with it, because I don't want to be complacent one way or another, like too much work or too much family. Part of me looks at it, and this is not necessarily a good answer. I don't actually know if this is a healthy answer, but this is how my mind views it. Is I feel like, especially with the Better Life Tribe, I feel like from a religious or spiritual standpoint, that was there's a whole story on I met Tim Tebow and learned about human trafficking and blew my mind and was crying, and I'm it was a horrible situation that people go through. So that whole organization goes towards the fighting against human trafficking. That is a massive problem that I can never even put hardly a dent in, right? No matter how hard I work. So on one hand, I want to say that I'll stop working when the last person's freed, But there's 50 million people that are trapped in some sort of slavery in the world today. It's worse than it's ever been. So I also that's why I say I don't really know if that's a healthy response. Tim Tebow's got a great saying where he says, "I don't want to enter heaven well rested," and I love that. I don't want to enter heaven just well rested. Oh well, that was an easy life. I don't want to end this life feeling like I left anything out on the field. And at the same time, I will not sacrifice my family. God is not asking people to sacrifice their family or their marriages for some cause. The cause is your marriage and your kids first and foremost, I believe. And so, my Jiminy Cricket on the shoulder, my conscience is my wife. When it comes to the marriage, right? I don't judge if I have a good marriage. My wife judges, or I don't judge if I'm a good husband. She judges if I'm a good husband. I can't really say if I'm a good father or not. My kids are the ones that judge whether I'm a good father or not. So yeah, I guess I wrestle that way as I look at them for guidance on that, and I check in with my wife a lot. How am I doing? Is this too much? And usually the answer is yes, and that's okay. I'm gonna try to pull back a little bit, and ebbs and flows a little bit. I took 4 months off. We went and traveled the country in an Airstream a couple of years ago, and I was bored out of my mind. So I had to get back to work.
Yeah, in some ways that's the answer. I get it. Yeah, that's cool. Talk to me about spirituality for you. I know you. This is an important part of your life.
Yeah.
Where did you find that? When did you find that?
Raised in a Christian home. In typical Midwest. I went to church every Sunday. Got really involved in music at a young age. So I started playing guitar when I was maybe 15, and I started playing for the church, kind of the youth worship team or whatever at our church. I had a youth pastor named Troy and his wife Sandy. They led music, or she played music, and Troy was a youth leader. And I really bonded with this guy Troy and Sandy. Really Troy, but then his wife Sandy. We got really close and ended up just learning a lot from them on what it means to be a Christian, and not in the typical American sense of it. What does it actually mean to give a shit about the poor? Like, what does it actually mean to like help people who are vulnerable and to love your, like, what does it actually mean to love your neighbor, you know, like, and not just, you know, on Sunday, smile at them. And so I learned a lot from them there, and what it actually means to, like, what did Jesus actually say? So then I went to college, and actually, ironically, I went to a college because I chose it because that guy Troy ended up getting a job across the country in this town, and there was a little tiny Christian college in that town. So I was like, well, I'll just go there because I really like Troy and I want to hang out with him more. And so I was an intern for him that year a little bit and went to this college. That's where I met my wife, which is cool. And so there, I continued to play music. And I've played music ever since there. I've led music at different churches. So yeah, spirituality today. I mean, I'm a Bible-believing Christian. Definitely, I don't go to church every single week because whatever, I'm a heathen. And I'm lack of discipline sometimes. But I am such a big believer in the community that comes with church in addition to church. So even if I didn't believe in God, I believe in church.
Yeah, right. And, I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah, and there's such power, and like, I mean, we were talking about it a few hours ago, you and I out there with this community we have here in Maui, where somebody's always texting somebody saying, hey, we're gonna think. That was all built through church. We've got this group called the Maui Cool Kids. It's just like, we all just started texting each other, this group text, which is a great tip for people. If you just put all your friends in a group text, don't let anybody with a green, you know, bubble in, but all your iPhone people in this group text, and then just say like, hey, we're headed here, anybody wants to join. Yeah. Like, that is the most active group ever. Like, every other day we're with somebody in that group hanging out. And so like, and then sometimes I think, like, maybe that's church, right? Like that, I think that's what church was meant to be. Not necessarily building, even though I'm still a fan of the building. Like, I still think that there's something important about going there. But yeah, so for me, yeah, that's what spirituality is still just trying to be. What does it mean to walk more like what Jesus was portraying, to love God and love others, and what does that mean to demonstrate that for other people, especially my kids?
Do you feel there's any dark side to religion for you or Christianity?
Yeah. That
rubs you the wrong way?
I mean, there's the entire Donald Trump Christianity, we call it, you know, like it, you know, like there's the entire world of Christian-y in America, and it's, I don't identify with much of it. And I get why there's a million different denominations and different paths, so to speak, in the Christian faith. And I think that's good for a reason, because there are people who really like to wear a suit and tie and to sing Southern gospel hymns without music. They really love that. Great for them. And there are people who just really want their guns, and they just are gun people. And so there's a church for gun people. And I think that's a good thing. So as a whole, if you look at the church like capital C, I'm a big fan of what I believe God is doing in terms of community of people who have a similar mission in life, and that is to serve God and serve people, love God, love people. But then there's just such hypocrisy in the church between Christians, right? And this is all faith, I'm sure. I mean, there's terrible people in every faith. And it's hard to identify with that, or to be identified with that, right?
Yeah.
The pastors who are molesting little kids, or the priests who are, doing this stuff, or just the hypocrisy. Even the little things like, being rude to like they say, like waiters always say, like the worst day of the week for customers is Sunday after church.
Really?
It's the Sunday after church crowd is like the rudest people. Yeah, and I've heard that. And I'm like, I'm not surprised. Like, yeah. But then I'm reminded always that, like, I think it's even the words of Jesus. Like, Jesus didn't come for the healthy, he came for the sick. So in other words, the church, capital C, is a place for the sick, not for the healthy. So of course that would be, that's okay to be identified. Like, some people are like, yeah, the church is full of hypocrites. I'm like, yeah, it is. Like, thank God we have it. Like, that's kind of how I view it. Is like. And then I'm not so sad that everyone's a little bit messed up.
Yeah. When you think about your growth as a human, how old are you now?
38.
38. So at 38, over the last year, or actually let's just say even over the last 5 years, how have you shifted the most? Like, what did you once believe that you no longer believe? What is more clear to you now? Like, how has Brandon Turner in the last 5 years evolved?
Yeah.
How might you articulate that?
Yeah, a couple ways. From a very like business aspect, I used to be all real estate all the time, and I thought that was just the best thing in the world. I still like real estate, I still have a lot of it, but I'm a much bigger fan of business. Now, I just merged the two, and now I have a business that does real estate. But just in general, like I couldn't care less if you want to start a tribe for, you know, dads, for family men who want to own businesses.
Yeah.
Am I saying the phrase close?
Family men with businesses,
There
not
you go.
businessmen with families.
Yeah, like if you want to start that and build wealth that way, like love it just as much if you were on flip houses or buy rental properties, right? It doesn't make a difference to me. They're both work, they both make money, they both are assets that are good. So I've shifted that way a lot, where I encourage people just as much out of real estate as into real estate, especially entrepreneurs. I'm always talking entrepreneurs out of real estate, because it's incredibly hard, and if you try to divert your focus, you'll catch, you know, what's the quote? It's like if you try to chase two foxes, you'll catch neither.
Yeah, that's right.
Or chase two rabbits, you catch neither. I think it's in the one thing they say that. So that's one area. I've become maybe like a spiritual / political standpoint, a little less conservative and a little more liberal. And what I mean by that is like, I mean, I used to be very much on the I worked a Republican congresswoman's internship in college, so like I was like, you know, I met George W. Bush, shook his hand, actually held his hand for a good 30 seconds. It was the most awkward moment of my life, but it was great. So like I was on that train, and I have gotten a lot more nuanced with my beliefs on that, where people, I don't want to say just Christians, people tend to want to put all their beliefs into one bucket because it's easier to argue or comprehend or both. So things like, well, I believe in, example, like I'm actually a big advocate. I would love to have universal health care. I don't care if we have to pay way more taxes for it. I would love to have everyone have health care in America. But I also really like having guns. And I'm okay with both those things, where the majority of the world, and me in the past, wouldn't have been. I would have said, no, if I want guns, that means I can't want health care. And so I've learned that to separate my beliefs into many, many buckets versus trying to get them into one of two.
That's cool.
Which I think most Americans could use some
That makes sense.
help there.
Do you talk politics much on your show?
Very little.
Very little.
Yeah.
Do you?
I don't even care about politics all that much anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, very little. At one point, I wanted to become president. That was like very much like.
When was that?
In high school, I wanted.
Really?
I said I was going to go into politics or to be president. Then I was going to go to law school because that would get me down that path.
Yeah.
I've not really ever talked about this. I remember saying it in 5th grade. My mom said, "You can do anything if you want." I said, "Okay, I want to be president."
Yeah.
And then I told my wife first time I met her, first day, I said, "Someday I want to be a U.S. senator." Then I worked that campaign, and I was like, I don't want to touch politics.
Yeah.
It was just ugly.
You know, the interesting thing about politics for me recently has been I've enjoyed talking about it with people, but not to make a point, like, oh, I got to convince them that this is how it should be, but really because I think it's such a window into somebody's world.
Yeah.
Even the uncomfortableness of it, like and how polarizing that can be, and what it means to them, and the traumas that it can open up. Like if I'm really trying to get to know somebody, it's more of just it's an opportunity for me to learn about them. And also myself, like because I haven't talked about it, but mostly because the people pleaser that I was telling you about earlier, like is very active for me. So if I'm like, oh, if I tell somebody that I would have voted this way or that way or had this thought, like I'm gonna have some people that don't like me, and that was terrifying. Dude,
I have the people pleaser in me as well. It's deep, man.
Yeah, very interesting. When is the last time that you like deeply cried? And it could be tears of joy, it could be tears of sadness, but when is the last time for you that happened?
Deeply cried? Man, it's been incredibly long. I mean, like sobbing would have been like middle school. Like I don't cry much.
Really? Do you not let yourself cry?
Probably. I think there's probably a stoppage in there. I mean, there's moments where like, in a really like, for example, listening to Tim Tebow talk about human trafficking, that was probably the last time it was a good solid, like there were definitely tears. Like I would have needed a tissue. that night, because he's just such a phenomenal communicator about a topic that's just heart-wrenching, and it's all just stories, like first-hand stories of him and his dad, what they've seen. So that was, yeah, but I feel a stoppage, like in a moment, like even if I was watching a movie that like I choke up more, for sure, since having kids.
Yeah.
I listened to that song "Daughter" from Ben Rector. Have you heard that song?
No.
So good. Listen to it later. But because even if you have a son, it's the same principle. But he says I cry during movies more. In that song, there's a line just says I cry during movies more, and I noticed that too. Since having kids, I choke up a little bit more, especially when talking about kids. But I can stop it every time. It's like nope, can't let myself go there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's some deep childhood trauma there stopping it.
Maybe. When you think about men that you have in your life that are models for you, examples for you, who comes to mind as somebody that's like, God, this dude in my world, love how he just shows up as a man, as a father, if he is one, but like, who mentors do you have?
Yeah, couple people. One, I mentioned that guy Troy earlier. Yeah. Today, still, actually, ironically, we kind of kept in touch for the last 20 years. But last year, my wife and I were looking at starting a sort of, it's not a school, but it was like, let's get all of our friends that are homeschooling in the neighborhood together and then just do lessons in our basement, like on our main floor. We have like an extra unit. We'll just have all the kids learn there, and we'll hire a teacher to come in and just kind of tutor everybody every day. So we ended up hiring Sandy and Troy. Well, Sandy, the wife of Troy, so they moved out here. So I know I get to hang out with Troy again. So I like Troy. Yeah, it's so cool. It's like so full circle. So they're back in my life again. So I mean, I see Troy and I see the way he raises kids and the way his kids turn out, and I'm like, man, that's a solid guy. He did a good job. He's a teacher now.
What's he doing?
He's a teacher for like developmentally disabled kids in school here. So he got a job working here in a school in Maui, and helps kids, which is powerful. So I'd say that's a big example. I mean, guys like Justin Donald, we talked about that on my show, where Justin, just seeing how he's set his business up in such a way that he can be with his family all the time. That's been really powerful. Costin, to see how he deals with his kids and how he's raising his boys. Like
Dude, it is so great.
Yeah, he's a great father to those kids. It's really fun to watch him.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
I was at his kitchen table like 2 weeks ago,
that's so cool.
and watching him dad was just the best, man.
He's a special guy.
Met his mom, met his brother,
cool.
like just got a chance to. But here's what's cool, man. And I'm wondering if you do this. Do you go to people's homes at all, other people's homes, and stay with them? Is that part of your traveling?
Not since having kids.
Okay.
Though when I found my business partner for Open Door Capital, when we first started it, before we was in the company, it was this guy Ryan who just emailed me like, hey, I found a deal you might be interested in, and it was like 4,000 miles away, and I'm like, I mean, the only way I'm going to do this is if you partner with me. And he's like, oh, okay, we can talk about that. And I was like, but I have to come stay with you. So I flew up across the country and I stayed with him for like 4 days. Because I was like, if I can't stay in someone's house with them and really get to know them, I shouldn't be.
How was that?
It was awkward and great. And I got to meet Pinky, and then they moved out here to Hawaii. And they lived in my backyard for 5 years. They lived with me.
Dude, I have been traveling lately and staying with people. Yeah. And as a dad, I honestly, I'm blown away by how powerful this is. Yeah. Like when I was just with Fritz, I saw his family meeting. Yeah. I saw his nanny run a family meeting where they had like one of the kids stand up and they were like the leader of the meeting, and they went over their family motto and they did all these cool things. And then watching Kasum, like how he runs his checklist with his kids, or how like just his rules, or how he showed, like all of it. It is the most fascinating thing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Out here in Hawaii, we have that extra unit. We have an extra unit at our house. I recommend everybody should have a house with an extra unit. If you need to cut costs, whatever, you can rent it out and make money, right? But more importantly, is you just let people stay there.
Just have people over.
And we probably had, I'm not even kidding, probably 200 families visit in the past 5 years. And so
that's remarkable.
Anywhere from like a weekend to like a month or two, we've had people stay.
Wow.
And they just stay in our basement and we just do life together. And
do you ever feel like you're like, hey, it was nice to have you, but it's time to move on?
Not usually, but sometimes what I've learned is I'm a people person. Like I love people. I just get fired up by it. I've learned she needs like boundaries, and so she needs more like, hey, we'll have people here for a week, and then we need 3 weeks off. Then we can have people again. So she needs more spaced out, but no, I love it. Because yeah, you just learn how they do life. Yeah, it's beautiful to watch that. Do you know Lior? A guy named Lior Weinstein.
Yeah.
He's in front row dance.
He is,
yeah. I got that guy. But Lior is one of the most, if not the most brilliant person I've ever met in my life. Like just sheer intelligence, unbelievable. Also a great dad, great entrepreneur. But Lior, the way we met is because I mentioned on a podcast once, just some random podcast. He didn't even listen to my show. He just happened to see it on YouTube. And I mentioned in the middle of the podcast that I was launching some business idea called Month in Maui. Now the business never worked out, never panned out. But the idea was like, hey, come to Maui, you can stay in my condo, you get my car, I'll get you a car, I'll get you the condo, and I'll get you like tickets for all the greatest things in Maui for a solid month. You bring your family and it's like a, live like a local in the greatest place on earth. The only customer I ever had one time was Lior. Like Lior was the only one who called me up, and I'd already shut the business down. So he calls me and he's like, hey, I heard about this Month in Maui thing, I'd like to book it. And I was like, what? I don't even have any more, but you can stay in my basement. And he's like, okay. So Lior and his family come over and spend a whole month with us in our basement.
No way.
He's now one of my best friends in the world, and I love him. And yeah, I've learned so much from him just from him coming to stay.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What's something specific that you love about him that you saw in him?
Lior, a couple things. One, Lior has a policy. We've traveled with him now a couple times. We've done a cruise with them. He has a policy when traveling, he will always opt for the most expensive option on whatever it is. So if it's a hotel room, what's the most expensive hotel room you have in this hotel? If it's travel, what's the most expensive airline ticket? And throughout the whole year you do that. You might spend an extra, $20,000 a year by doing this. But he's like, the memories you make with expensive things, just, they're so much deeper. And it sounds almost cheesy, and people who are not wealthy are gonna just roll their eyes at this, but there's just something pretty magical walking into a suite in the cruise. And like his suite was at the front of the ship, and it was like 3,000 square feet. I'm like, and it wasn't that much more expensive than everything else. When you add up a whole cost of a vacation, of a $20,000 vacation, it was like 23 instead of 20. Like it wasn't. So I learned that from Lior is like on vacations. Well, actually, the rule is vacations with family, you splurge on everything. And vacations with yourself, he's like, I'm in the Southwest in the back, in the back, middle seat. Like, I'm the cheapest I can be, because he's like, I don't care about the luxury, I care about the memories with my kids. And so anyway, that's one thing I learned from him. He also was just a brilliant adopter of technology in every business. He's always so curious of how can this technology, he knows about every technology a month before anybody in the world knows about it. So
he spoke at our event in December. He talked about using AI to be a great dad.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He gave some cool ideas. One guy, I remember from Lior's idea, he found a way to replicate his wife's mother's voice by feeding the system whatever videos they had, and then she was able to read. He wrote something and she read it in her voice, so he used all the AI to do this. It was a gift to his wife.
Dude, nobody's done this yet, but this is an idea. I'm going to put it out here so somebody can take this idea, because I'm not going to do it. But it's a brilliant idea. It's a kid's storybook app where the kid writes their own bedtime story every single night with just a couple of prompts, right?
Yes.
And so it's just like, hey, what do you want tonight's story to be about? Because I do this with my kids every night. Actually, I literally do this almost every night. I'll open up the OpenAI app now, and I'll say, let's see, where's that? Chat GPT, and it has a new speaking feature. So
Tiger was just telling me about this.
Yeah, I'll do this and I'll say, tell me a bedtime story about, and my son will say something like, Sonic the Hedgehog. I'll go, it's connecting. Tell me a bedtime story about Sonic the Hedgehog and Jigglypuff.
Once upon a time, in the vibrant world of Green Hill Zone, Sonic the Hedgehog was zipping through the loop-de-loop.
We'll do that almost every single night. It's like a 4-minute little video. So you do that, and you can get the AI picture, so you can have a picture of whatever the story is, and every night the kid makes their own story. Especially I'll be and include my son Wilder, who's 5, and my daughter Rosie, who's 8. And then it'll include them in the story, and it's just so, every night they beg for that now. There's do another a computer story, or whatever they call it. And,
so what are other moments like that you love as a dad? Where do you sink in, where you're like, oh, this feels right? I'm doing a good job. Man, swimming in the pool with my kids. I haven't done it in, it's
probably been 3 weeks, 4 weeks, which is a shame on me, because I love it, and they love it. They get all in on it, and we'll swim for hours out in that pool. I pay $1,000 a month to heat my pool. It's in Hawaii, which you wouldn't think you need to heat a pool in Hawaii, but if it's not heated, and for the first year it wasn't, you can last about 10, 15 minutes before you're freezing cold and gotta get out. And so I deliberately keep it hot at like 91 degrees all the time.
Wow, that's awesome.
24/7, because I'm like, the moment my kid says, let's go swimming, Dad, I don't want to ever be like,
that's great.
10 minutes is fine. Like, I want hours in the pool. So swimming in the pool is magical. Playing Super Smash Brothers with my 4-year-old, I was telling you, the first time he played, he beat me, which is ridiculous. But it's sad. I don't know how to navigate it yet. I'm working on it. But the bonding that we build through playing video games together is just insane. Where my daughter could care less. She doesn't care about YouTube or technology. She doesn't want any of that. But she'll get lost in little worlds of, little play toys for hours. So getting on the floor with the kids has been just, I read that in a book early on, was like, you can be a parent to kids, or you can like be a parent, like on the ground, be with the kid. And it's a whole different thing to be on their level than be talking down to them or talking to them or telling them what to do. So getting in their world, just literally lunch right before we did our podcast today, I went home and Wilder's yelling, want to play video games? I'm like, I can't, buddy, I gotta go back to work. And he said, well, can we play Keepy Uppy? Which is like the balloon, you pop it in the air. And I was like, let's do it. So for 10 minutes, we ran around the living room just keeping the balloon in the air. And it was such a great lunch break. One of the best lunch breaks I ever had. We just played Keepy Uppy for a bit. So just getting in their world and like playing with them, it just feels like, this is parenthood. This is good.
What's your relationship to play? Like, do you play? Do you find
Me
yourself?
personally?
Yeah.
Back in the day when I moved to Hawaii, I surfed a lot. Like 3 days a week I'd surf, and I loved it. I moved to Hawaii to surf more, and but I just quickly, I don't want to say outgrew it. Like the enjoyment of it was not as, I didn't get as much enjoyment as the work put in to have to go do it. Like it's cold in the water, and I got to get up early, and it's also like, as a father of young kids, like you get like one hobby maybe. Otherwise you're just being self-indulgent, and so like leaving my wife with everything. So it's like I get one good hobby, and it was surfing for a while, then it turned into jiu-jitsu. In the past year, jiu-jitsu's gone to almost nothing, and it's just been work. And so that's where I'm trying to dig out of the amount of work. And there's a reason for all the work. It's like I had to solve some problems in a lot of my businesses, and I've done it now, but it took digging in there and working.
Seasons.
Definitely been a season of work, and I feel like I'm coming out of that now.
Are you pretty good at jiu-jitsu?
No, I'm not. I'm still a white belt after like 4 years, because I'm never consistent enough I'll go for like 6 months and I'll be off.
I worry I'm going to get hurt, man.
You might, but
I worry at 48, like I'm going to get hurt.
Yeah, you will get hurt. There's something, what's the line from Fight Club? I don't want to die without scars.
Dude, one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I'm reading the book right now. I've never read the book. It's so good.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I should totally read the book.
The book is exactly like the movie, and I mean that in the best way. It's written in such a unique, like super good style, and like just raw and gritty and funny. I'm just like, I'm so thoroughly enjoying listening. I'm listening to it on Audible or whatever right now, Fight Club. And it's just as good as the movie.
I remember reading, you do like 50 to 75 books a year.
Yeah, probably.
Some on Audible, some on Kindle, some hard copy.
Yeah.
Have you always had this, like, I'd call that an insatiable appetite for reading?
Yeah.
Has that always been there?
Yeah, it's all, I mean, ever since I was a kid, do you remember the Great Illustrated Classics book series? I mean, you would have been a little older than me, you're about 10 years older, right? So back when I was maybe middle schooler, these books got really popular. White books with like red font, and they had always like these pictures every page, but they were all the great books, like every book you could imagine, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or Moby Dick, or Journey to the Center of the Earth, all these. So I had a collection of like 50 of these books. My mom would just buy them for me, and I would just read them like nonstop. And in like high school, I got into, do you remember the Christian book series Left Behind?
No.
It was super popular back in the 90s. Really Christian, but really, really well-made books. Anyway, there's 12 of them, and I probably read that whole series 12 times.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway, then I discovered business books and real estate books, and I read hundreds of them. So, yeah, and I think people think, when you hear somebody reads 50 or 100 books a year, I think people think of that as like, wow, they must be reading all the time. And the truth is, I don't read all the time. I just read consistently. Like the truth to reading a lot of books is just reading every day for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Like it's maybe 20 minutes a day, but that gets me about a book a week. Like, and I'm a fast reader because I read so much, you get faster and faster. So I can really read a book pretty quickly. And yeah, so I just read every day. And if I'm driving, I'm usually listening to an audiobook. Yeah, it adds up.
You had Kiyosaki on your show, right?
Yeah.
Was he a big influence for you?
Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad was, yeah, definitely. I mean, what I would say about Rich Dad Poor Dad is it put words to that like groaning in my soul that something is wrong with the world and the way that this script has been written, right? Like my favorite movie as a teenager was Office Space. Don't touch my stapler.
Dude, it's so good.
That movie influenced me so deeply. As like,
reports.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, I could never do that type of a job.
Right, sure.
And so it's like, that was showing there's a problem. And then Rich Dad Poor Dad was like, oh, now I see the problem.
Yeah.
This is it. It's that, like, our world is messed up because we're building businesses for other people, making them wealthy rather than making ourselves wealthy. I'd already gotten into real estate before reading it. I bought a couple properties, but that book was like, oh, now I know how to talk about it. And we have a common vocabulary. It's like a cult. I mean, I interviewed 500 people on the BiggerPockets podcast, all real estate investors over the course of a decade. And I would guess 90% of them, if not more, said Rich Dad Poor Dad was the book that got him in.
Yeah,
We'd always ask that
all
question.
the time.
Yeah, it's always Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's unreal.
So you go out, you make a ton of money in this real estate world. You're still making great money in the real estate world. I'm
Trying.
I'm projecting some beliefs of mine, but
Yeah.
I haven't asked you for numbers, but it looks that way. It looks
it's
like,
less than I think, but
it looks like things are going okay.
Yeah, they're okay.
Yeah, things are okay. You're gonna be able to eat today.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me, and I'm really curious about this, is like, I would have imagined, and I'm totally speaking from my own, like what it would have felt like, but you get into this world, you figure it out, you make this money, and now that you have financial freedom, like you're still teaching other people to do this, and then you're donating all this money to charity and whatnot. You've got your hands deeply still in the real estate game.
Yeah.
I always thought real estate was this like vehicle to get you this financial freedom, but you seem to still be enjoying this space, loving the challenge, wanting to help other people do it. Talk to me about that drive, and also like, is there a part of you that's like, how do you overcome the maybe the not so sexy parts of it that have to get done, if that makes sense?
Yeah, Warren Buffett has a great quote. I'm going to butcher it, but he basically says, look, I could have, something like God could have given me a desire to be a school teacher, and that's what I would have been. I don't know why he gave me a desire for stocks, but it's made me a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I don't know why, but I actually do love real estate. I really enjoy it. I think it's an incredible business. I think it's the best business because it just gets better over time and it gets easier over time. And there's so many benefits to it, but I genuinely love it. Like, I could sit down with a brand newbie who's just like, I want to buy my first deal, and have a thrilling conversation about how to buy your very first deal, and I would love every second of it. In the same way I can talk with somebody about how to buy a skyscraper and have a thrilling conversation. It's all the exact same game. It never changes. And so it's like playing real life Monopoly. I've just never gotten tired of Monopoly. And as a precursor, I guess, to my real estate, or it's almost like a foreshadowing, that's the word I'm looking for, a foreshadowing. In high school, my buddy and I played Monopoly every single day one summer. It was 70 days straight. We played a game of Monopoly every single day. And it was just it started out as we just played once, and then I was like, let's play again tomorrow. And then we played it 3, and I was like, how long can we go? So we played a good, 70 days, I think it was, in a row. We can get down to a game, I think the shortest one was 21 minutes, which is absurd. But we were so fast.
What's the strategy for winning Monopoly?
You buy everything. I mean, it literally is a strategy. It's actually
buy
really...
corners?
It's literally buy everything and mortgage everything along the way, because people don't know you can mortgage property along the way.
Right.
So you buy something, you immediately mortgage it, because you don't need the $3 you don't need the $3 from rent. You need that $100 back so you can buy the next property. So
I'm gonna crush my kids.
You buy everything, and as soon as you run out of money, you mortgage everything until you own everything else, and then you just put all your money on one Monopoly. And then as soon as somebody hits it, they're done.
Yeah.
And if you go aggressive like that, so now I look at my own life and I'm like, that's exactly what I did.
Dude, I love watching you light up right
Dude.
now.
That's my life. That's real estate. Is you just not over leverage. You just leverage. You put in money to buy something. You pull the money back out. You still own the assets, and then you use it to buy more. And then you pull that money out, use it to buy more, and you put it all in on one big thing. And that's how you make $1 billion in real estate.
Dude, I love how passionate you just got. That's so
Dude,
great.
I love real estate. Like I said, this is actually my thing. I think almost every real estate influencer I'm friends with, we all, like when behind the scenes, everyone will say things like, geez, I just hate talking about real estate. Like, let's just talk about anything else. I'm like, really? Like, I just want to talk about real estate. Like, I love this game. Oh, it's so fun.
You were saying earlier, if I heard you correctly, you said something to the effect of, you might try to talk some entrepreneurs out of real estate.
Yeah, very much.
Go there for a minute. Why?
Yeah, I was like, here's what happens. People come to me all the time. I had a gentleman recently, I did a coaching conversation with him. Like, I don't do much coaching, but every once in a while, for a very expensive amount of money, I will sit down with someone and talk to them about their business. This guy had a business that was doing $1 million a year in profit, and he was working about 8 hours a week of it. His wife was working like 20, maybe or 30. And so he came to me and was like, I want to get into what you're doing with mobile home parks and buy all those. And we talked for 4 hours. And the end result that I basically got to, and he ended up taking my advice and running with it, is it'll be far, far easier for you to go from you're working minimal hours, making $1 million a year. Why don't we put in 20 hours into your business and get it working 10 million a year in profit, than trying to go from 0 to $1 million. Going from $1 million to 10 million is easier than going from 0 to $1 million. Right? That the getting out of orbit, if you're a rocket ship, right? Just getting that escape velocity, all the energy is burned in that first little bit. So the first million is the hardest. So most entrepreneurs, the truth is they're either bored or they're in the dip, like Seth Godin's dip, which is it just gets hard and it's a grind, and then the grass looks greener over at real estate. Now you should still do real estate. You should still invest in real estate. You should just not do real estate.
Put your money in a syndication.
Yeah, put your money in a syndication, put it into a REIT, put it into, like, buy yourself a nice house that you can easily afford, but like a nice house. Like, keep your money in real estate. Tim Ferriss, when I interviewed him on the BiggerPockets podcast, his whole strategy with real estate, because he's an investor, but his strategy is super weird, but it works for him. He's like, I just buy really nice properties, I pay all cash for them, I leave them empty all the time. He's like, I just store my money in real estate because I think long term it's a good play.
Right.
He's like, and then I have places for my friends to stay when they travel into a city, they can just stay at my place. So he's got cities, houses all over the country in these really great areas. He gets to bless people with it, and it holds his value. And he told, this was 8 years ago I interviewed him now, which means I bet you he's made just tens of millions of dollars in equity off those properties.
Right.
And like, I'm not saying you should go buy a property and leave it empty. Like, that's a terrible return on your investment. Like, you can get a way higher return than that. But it's a great asset to hold on to.
But it's also lifestyle design.
Yes, it is very much Tim Ferriss' lifestyle design. It's exactly what he preaches. It's not about, and there's a book out there. It's kind of a cheesy book, but I really like it. It's called Life and Air. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Life and Air, they make this point that if not millionaire, but life and air. If the point of life is to make $1 million or more, or to be rich, you would play by certain rules. But the goal of life is not to make millions of dollars. The goal of life is to have the best life possible.
Right. Yeah.
So therefore, the rules that oftentimes we put out there, like, oh, you should definitely have a mortgage on your house. Mathematically, yes, you should. And I have a mortgage on my house, but like, if the goal is actually to have as less stress as possible, then maybe a mortgage. Right. It's the game you're playing. The rules should be dictated by the goal. And so really defining what that goal of your life is, then you can start making rules that make sense for you, that don't have to make sense for somebody else.
Definitely. For our community in particular, since it's not a real estate investing community, although we have lots of guys that invest in real estate, and we have guys like David Osborne's a front row dad, Mike McCarthy, other people that are like big in real estate. The question is, if somebody in our community wanted to get into real estate, and you were like, hey, let me just point you in a direction, would you say, look, if you're a dad, you've got a business, you want to put your money somewhere, would the advice be syndication? Would it be, hey, hire a team and go after some mobile home parks, which I know guys have done and done successfully, self-storage. Where might you, or does it not matter?
Yeah, I'll re-mention that if your time is if you're really honest with yourself and your time is best spent on your business, which most of the cases it is, then you should do that, and then just consider a REIT or a syndication, something like that, just to get your money working in real estate. If you don't think you can use it in your own business, again, you're still probably better off using your money in your own business. But there's a nice value of diversification, so if your business fails, you're covered, right? So yeah, dumping it into different people's syndication is fine. But if you want to go the other route and you want to be somewhat more involved, I've been thinking a lot lately about how the old model of buy a rental house and then rent that house out doesn't really work with interest rates where they are today and prices where they are. Just in almost no market, maybe like Lincoln, Nebraska, you can make it work. But almost nowhere does it work. So instead, what we're looking for today and what I'm preaching and teaching all the time is to look for what are the cash flow vehicles? What actually does make money today? And that's things like assisted living, super powerful right now. There's a strategy called rent by the room or co-living, pad split, where you buy a house with 8 bedrooms, rent out each bedroom separately. That's super powerful in areas like Austin or anywhere in California, like places where it's expensive to live. Self-storage, can be great. The big ones are hard. Same with mobile home parks. Big ones are hard because guys like I are competing and getting really aggressive at them. But mid-sized ones, like I'm not touching a 50-unit mobile home park. And so there's huge opportunity there. Right. The most important thing, though, I can say is to go a mile deep and an inch wide on that. Like today, the real estate market is different than it's ever been before because there's so many people in it and there's so much knowledge around that you cannot be mediocre anymore. Back in the day, you could be mediocre at real estate and do great. Long term, you buy anything and 30 years from now, you're still fine. But you got to be able to hold it that long. And the only way to hold it that long today is being great. Well, how do you become great at anything? Right? It's the Bruce Lee, I fear a man not who's practiced 10,000 different kicks, but it's the man who's done one kick 10,000 times. Yes. You have to do 10,000 kicks. And the way you do that is by being specific. So there's a great quote from Gino Wickman says, it's more important that you decide than what you decide. So in real estate, it's like you pick your thing and say, that's what I'm going to go all in on. For me, after waffling for years and hardly buying anything, I said, you know what? I just have to pick a thing. Mobile home parks. There wasn't actually a lot of...
What year was that for you?
6 years ago I did that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I had roughly 30 rental units at the time. And I was like, I got to do something because I'm buying like 1 unit a year and I got money. And like I realized it was indecision was a decision in itself to do nothing. So I said, I'm going to go all in. And I went all in mobile home parks. And then we bought, I think we have 6,000 mobile home units right now. And that because we got so good at that, now we added on other things. We do self-storage, we do a few other things, apartments and such. But it wasn't until we were world-class at mobile home parks. And that's how I would say almost every single successful person I've ever met in my entire life just went all in on something until it was successful. And every failure person I've ever met tried to do 5 things at once.
Yeah. And also I love the idea of being in on one thing for quality of life.
Yes,
my thing for my wife and kids as a result of being in on one thing is very different. My Tiger's 14, sitting out in the other room right now.
Very patient for a long time today.
He's doing great. By the way, did you see he gave me a hug when I came out?
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's like the best part of the day.
Yeah, that's so good.
I've thought about buying a property with him just as like a way.
Oh, dude, I got something on that. But
yes.
keep going.
What I wanted to ask you is like, I'm a little like, do I buy a duplex? How do I do this? How do I loop him in?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, gosh, a little real estate on some level for him could be a really cool thing early on.
Yeah.
Like I get the whole like if you start putting money now and the compounding interest, but if you own property now, 50 years, like.
Yeah, the compounding interest obviously a huge thing. The compound knowledge is so much more important because like if you teach a person in their teenager years like how real estate works, how the language of business works, the language of real estate, from those things, like that's going to compound and like that knowledge is going to get better and better and better. He's going to be so set for from 30 on. I mean, you can stick money again in the stock market, but the returns from real estate are arguably double if not better than the stock market.
Right.
So if you're talking about a 30-year, 40-year, 50-year span of time, like I'm not a big fan of those guys who are like, hey, if you put whatever, $100 a month for the next 60 years, you'll be the richest person in your graveyard. You know, it's like who cares, right? But so if you want to shorten that amount of time, then you got to get a higher return. How do you get a higher return? You work at it. What do you work at? Real estate or business? One of the two.
Yeah.
So if you get at real estate at a young age, one, they could do nothing else his entire life, but own that one property. He's already a multimillionaire when he's 60, right? So it's an insurance policy against every other thing in his life going wrong. But chances are he'll learn something. Even if the first deal doesn't make a lot of cash flow, who cares? You learn something, he might get the bug. Probably most people do. I mean, real estate, 95% of Americans want to invest in real estate or something like that. Most people dream of it someday. Because it's tangible, it's fun, we all understand it for the most part. So yeah, I'm huge in that. But I'll even go a step back to your other son, Ocean. Got it. So Ocean, and this is for anybody who has younger kids at home. I've been preaching this since the day I started doing it, and it's one of the things that I'm probably most well known for. But if you buy your kid a property when they're real young, so I bought Rosie, my daughter, the week she was born, I bought her a fourplex. It was a 4-unit, nasty, ugly little property, four little units in Aberdeen, Washington. And I spent a year fixing it up. You know, you don't have to do this, but I did that. I spent a whole year fixing it up, hired contractors and all that. Got all done with it. And then I put it on a 15-year mortgage. So that in 15 years, the mortgage is paid off to zero. Well, what's the point of doing that? Well, I actually set it up on an 18-year mortgage because I looked at the date she would be graduating high school, and I had it set to pay off right when she graduates high school. It's still set to pay off like the year she graduates high school, even the month she graduates high school. And that was a simple calculation with like Dave Ramsey's pay off early calculator. Yeah. So, in other words, she has this property that we put not that much money to buy. It was $20,000 maybe into it total when she was young, and then over time, that loan gets paid down to zero. So at minimum, when she's 18, she has a property that's worth, I said at the time, $200,000. At minimum, she's gonna have a $200,000 property. It's been 7 years now since we bought that. It's already worth $500,000 today. Wow. Because its appreciation's gone nuts. But it could have stayed lower. It could have stayed lower. At very minimum, her entire college education was paid for. But I don't even care about that. I care about the fact that right now when she's doing her math homework, like we're about to start that this year, her math homework is now her rental property numbers. Yeah, that's right. She's going to deal with learning how to manage a property manager and how to read a financial statement for the next 15 years or whatever we have left with her. Not even that now, 10 years left with her. Crazy. She's going to learn her teenage years about how property works. So I'm such a big fan of getting your kids involved in that. So to go specific, yeah, I love small multifamily, duplex, triplex, fourplexes. When you can find those, student rentals are great, but rent by the room works in places like Austin. If you want to buy local, you don't have to. Yeah, you buy a nice little duplex. I mean, yeah, it's such a powerful way to train your kids. I'm 1,000% on board. You can call me anytime, and I'm happy to assist with that.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I love that we got there. I love that you just shared that philosophy, because to me, when we land on like co-created projects with our kids, doing life together, actual work,
real stuff,
that real stuff, like that's where that's where the juice is for me.
And I would love to like, so there's, I'll say what I was gonna say, and then I'll say like there's a danger to this, but I actually still love it. I would love to own a rental property with my kids in an area we lived in, and then go work on it with them. Even though like the hesitancy in my voice there is because I want them to be better at the business side of things and knowing how to hire people. But there is just value. Like I grew as a person when I was underneath my attorney's house for a week solid, putting up insulation. And like it's in my lungs and I'm probably gonna die earlier. But like that hard work of saying like this is incredibly difficult and miserable and I'm on the ground, there's spiders on me. But like I feel like I became a man like that week, under that house.
Yeah, I think that's actually a beautiful part of parenting too, is like I want Tiger to understand outsourcing. I want him to understand being productive, you know. And I had this conversation with Ryan Levesque, and it really, he changed something that he was doing in his homework. It's like we both were like hiring out food chefs, right? And then at some point, that type of productivity, like, well, let me tell you, if I hire out a chef, then I can make X more dollars but we miss the cooking with our kids
Yeah.
in the kitchen.
Yep.
Even if it's not the best use of your time,
Yep.
and it doesn't have to be that for everybody. It doesn't have to be cooking, but for him it was.
Yeah.
So he went back to like the sacred part of
Yeah.
like just cooking with our kids.
Yep.
So
And that goes back to the whole, like, what's the point of your life?
Yes,
If it's to
that's
maximize
right.
every dollar, then you should not cook your own meals.
That's right.
That's not the point of my life.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, all right, thinking about the point of your life, fast forwarding, a few years, and you look back, how do you know that you did good? I think I know where you might go with this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what is the sense of like, ultimately in the end, if I do this, if I show up this way, I will close my eyes and
Yeah.
evolve to whatever everybody believes, right? I know what you believe.
Yeah.
But it's like, what is it? What is that? What will you be feeling on your deathbed about your life?
Yeah, I
Perhaps.
think it really just all comes down to the dollars in my bank account.
That's where I thought you were going to go with it.
I couldn't
Yeah.
even say that with a straight face.
Yeah.
Oh, I was trying so hard, man. Oh, I was trying so hard. Yeah, no, I would like to say, like, I could screw up everything. My company could collapse. I could lose my health. I could gain 400 pounds and be overweight. If at the end of my life, I look back and my kids have a solid relationship with God, then I won. Like, that's how I view it. Is like if they're, and the reason I say that, again, for people who may have not any kind of spiritual life at all, I just think like what I'm getting at there is I want them to be grounded in like truth, and it's like grounded in both truth and purpose. Like, know why they're here. I don't need them to be rich. Like, I don't care if they're rich. In fact, I think there's a lot of danger to being rich. I think that there's a lot of unhappiness with wealthy people, and a lot of problems come from being wealthy. So I'm not actually the biggest promoter in the world of getting rich for rich sake. But yeah, if they can be well adjusted, see that there's a bigger purpose in life than themselves, serving other people, loving other people, and what I believe true like Christianity actually is and should be. If they're doing that, then I think I won. It means that they're good people. I don't want them to be good people.
I love that. One word to describe each of your children's spirit, what would it be? Individually, two
Yeah.
separate words,
Yeah. Rosie, we talked a little bit about this outside earlier about how my kids live up to their names, but yeah, so Rosie, oh, that's such a good question, man. There's so many words. What's the one? I mean, if it was a color, it would be pink, but it was a word. Just pretty. Like, the word pretty is where I'll use there. And I'm not talking about her looks, and it's everything. Everything is about being pretty, and her soul is so pretty. And Wilder, I'll use a hyphenated word, but it's my nickname for him, is Wild Man.
Yeah.
It's Wild Man. Like, I don't ever call him Wilder. It's always Wild Man.
Yeah.
And I learned that phrase from Wild Man was the book by John Eldridge, Wild at Heart. And he tells a story about a son climbing up, which Wild at Heart actually is part of the name Wilder came from, because I really liked that book when I was a teenager. But there's a story in Wild at Heart where his kid's climbing up a rock wall, and they're like, he's struggling, and the dad says, "You can do it, you're a wild man." And the kid digs deep, and he climbs up the hill the rest of the way. And there's just, and he basically uses that moment to teach about when you get, like, the words matter that we tell our kids, And so when I tell him Wilder that he's a wild man, I want him to believe he's a wild man, not a nice man. Like, nobody wants to be called nice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not a benefit. When people are like, "Oh, Brandon Turner, he's so nice," I'm like, like, that's not a compliment. Like, kind, sure. Brandon's kind.
It's like my yearbook signature
Yeah,
for all the girls.
yeah.
You're such a nice guy.
That's exactly
when I
it.
grow older, I'll go to marry somebody just like
Yeah.
you. Oh.
Yeah. I'm not going to date him right now. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want Wilder to be a nice guy. I want him to be a wild man.
Yeah, that's great, man. Because do you feel there's, like, you want that for you?
Yeah, very much. I think that, I don't want to be nice. I want to be wild. And then I find myself, like, obsessing about the whatever brand of jeans I'm wearing, and I'm like, well, that's not very wild. Like,
Qasim said at our last retreat, he said something that my buddy Tim had mentioned. We're raising kids to survive our childhood wounds. And in so many ways I can see that being true for me with my kids.
Yeah, I can see it too.
Yeah, especially like my junior high world, like how much I do to make sure that they don't experience that same thing.
Yeah.
Careful not to swing the pendulum too far, maybe the other way.
I worry a lot about the pendulum, because I was super nerdy. My parents didn't care anything about looks or hair gel or, nothing whatsoever, right? So I was a loser in high school and in middle school. I never danced with a girl. I never went to prom. I mean, I went to prom, I guess, as a friend of a friend, and didn't really dance there. So I was just a loser. So now I'm I want to fix my kids. I'm gonna make them cool. I want them to be cool, and I know I can make them cool. And then I'm I don't know if I want them to be cool.
Yes.
That's the danger.
Yes.
Because the cool kids didn't leave town.
Yeah,
they're still there, working at the pizza shop.
Brandon, this has been awesome, man, to get to know you and just learn a little bit more about your heart and what you care about. Yeah. Is there anything we didn't talk about today? Is there a question I didn't ask you that would be a big part of Brandon's work? First of all, there's a shit ton that I didn't ask you about.
You didn't talk about a mortgage company? Come on, man.
That's important in your world, so let's get that straight. But is there anything that, and I realize this is kind of a cheat code for getting to important stuff, but it's in my effort to get to know your heart and to elicit the wisdom that's within you, did I miss something that is right there that we could talk about to wrap this up? Open invite. If it's not, that's fine. But I'm just wondering, is there any part of Brandon, your parenting, marriage, business, you as a human, that you want the world, and by the world I mean our Front Row Dad community, to know about you? That's it.
No, but I'll leave everybody with a little tip, maybe I'll call it, something I just started doing, and I wish I remembered where I heard it, because it's such a cool idea. And it's going to edge on the spiritual side, but you could translate it to a non-spiritual book if you wanted to. I'm using the Bible for this example, but every single morning now, I wake up, when I wake up and I do my miracle morning routine, I read one chapter of the Bible. And then in the margins of, I bought a Bible specifically for this, in the margin of the Bible, in the edge on the thing, I take one thing from that chapter, just some word that stood out to me or a line or something, and I underline it, and then I write in the margins a note to Rosie. And I say, Rosie, something about, this morning I was reading this terrible story in the Old Testament about something with Jacob and his brother Esau, and they were fighting, and it was all this drama. And I just said something like, Rosie, I hope that you and your siblings always find a way back to each other the same way Jacob and Esau found a way back to each other and forgave each other. Just like that one note. But I do it in every single chapter of the Bible, and there's thousands of chapters of the Bible, right? It'll take me 3 years to get all the way through the Bible doing this. Every single chapter will have one note for Rosie. Wow. When she's 18, she'll get the Bible. Wow. But so in 3 years from now, when I finish it, guess what I'll do? I'm going to buy another Bible. I'm going to start over, and that one's for Wilder. And now we're pregnant with our third child, so it'll take me 9 years total to get through this. But here's the beauty. I mean, there's multiple things here, but this is one thing I did not expect. It's the depth of reading that I get now, reading it, because I'm writing notes to Rosie, but I'm also writing notes to myself and to that inner child. And I'm saying things to Rosie that I'm like, oh, I actually needed to hear that today too. Right. So that has been one of the most game-changing practices. And I mean, I'm only a month into it right now, but I already have roughly 30 little notes to Rosie that she's going to get someday, thousands of them from Dad. And should something drastic happen to me someday, if I pass away early or something like that, hopefully not, but wherever I'm at in that Bible then, Rosie's going to have those letters from Dad for the rest of her life.
I love that. I love the written word. I love notes. I love letters. I love books like you do. Is there a letter that you ever got, a note you ever got that really hit home that stands out?
Dude, I'm glad you asked this. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a podcast. My dad and my mom wrote me a letter when I was in my mom's stomach, and then they continued it for 3 years in their early years, and it ended up being a 12-page long letter about their hopes and dreams for me, and what they wanted me to grow to be like. And they got the idea from like a sermon they had heard at church, but they worked on it, and then they put it in a safe deposit box. And when we were 12, each of us kids, me and my siblings, all got it. We got to choose a vacation to go on anywhere in the country. I chose San Diego SeaWorld. I'd never been to California, and I thought it was the dreamland, kind of is. And we went to SeaWorld, and I opened it up at SeaWorld, and I got to read it. I just bawled my eyes out reading this note from my parents. So
At 12?
At 12, yeah. It was such an impactful moment. And I couldn't tell you today what the letter says. It's somewhere in my savings somewhere, in my box of safekeeping somewhere. But I just remember at 12, it was so important. And also because we knew the letter was coming. We all knew at 12 we got this letter that my parents wrote when they started before we were even born. Anyway, that was so meaningful that they would take time to do that. So yeah, that was huge.
Well, I don't think we could have scripted this any better. Certainly wasn't planned.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how you even knew to ask that
wait
question.
a minute.
I never talk about that.
And the fact that we started the earlier part of the show was like, where have you cried?
Yeah.
And
that was definitely.
You just ended by saying you bawled your eyes out.
Yeah.
With this letter.
Yeah.
So we got there. That's really cool, man. I love that. And my hope always in these conversations where you and I get to drop in and talk about life like this is that somebody will hear this and put some words on paper that might not have otherwise happened. And I think that's the benefit of community, that's the benefit of brotherhood, is like so much of, I find myself doing things that I've heard other men do or witnessed other men do. And I literally just translated immediately to my life. Like John Kane, I mentioned earlier, my best buddy, he picked up Tiger when he was about 5 years old. I'll never forget this moment. And John's like, 6'3", 270, picks up Tiger, puts his hand on Tiger's chest. And we're standing in his kitchen. I can picture exactly where we were. And he said, Tiger, I just want you to know I see a light in you. And then he just went on to like pour these beautiful words into Tiger. And I never forgot him picking up Tiger, putting his hand on his chest and saying these beautiful things. And since then, I must have picked up 100 children, held them in my arm, friends of mine, kids, right? And just said, I see a light in you. Yeah. I've literally replicated his words.
That's cool.
And so my hope is that in you and I having these conversations and what Front Row Dads can do is just create models, examples, pathways for people to connect with their children and connect with other people's kids too. So thanks for this conversation. Yeah. Thanks for having this conversation in your in your domain and letting me, and just be with you. And also thanks for seeing Tiger today and letting him, into your world a little bit too, because that to me is like, this is awesome. And that's like really, really awesome that my boy is in your office too, hanging with the great Brandon Turner. It was fun for me to just talk about you on the way out here and for him to learn about your world. And we watched a couple of your videos together and things like that. So thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
All right. BrandonTurner.com is a starting place maybe? Or
I'd go to I don't know, Instagram.
Okay.
That's really it. Beardy Brandon.
You got some good stuff on Instagram. I like what you're doing there. It's really cool. But lots of ways for people to get involved in your world. Better Life Tribe.
Yeah.
For
abetterlife.com.
For people that want to be in real estate. Profits going to support human trafficking. Yep. Open Door Capital. Yep. If somebody wants to park some funds, that would be a place. And
we like funds.
Yeah. Anything else I'm missing?
I don't know. Yeah, I got so much, but yeah, if you follow me, you'll hear about it. I spend a lot of time promoting myself, so it's out there.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.
All right. Let's fist bump it out.
Yes. Good way to end the show.
All right, man. Thank you.
You're a great interviewer.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Dude, are you kidding me? The last story?
Yeah, you didn't know that was about that? That's such a random question to you. That was that letter. Yeah, I gotta find it because, man, that was so. I don't even know. I can't tell you why it was so impactful, but it was so impactful. Yeah. And, for all my siblings, all four of us cried our eyes out reading these things from my parents, and it was such built up encouragement and just words of affirmation toward us. This is what we know you're going to be like, and what we. So I can't wait to read because it's been 20 years since I read it.
Dude, these guys, Tiger on his 13th birthday, and I got 13 guys to write him letters. Dude, you know the people. David Osborne.
Yeah.
Do you know David's like literally one of my best friends?
No.
I hang out with David more than maybe anybody.
That's funny.
Yeah. Mike McCarthy, John Brulin, John Berghoff, Hal Elrod. Like it's
funny,
his dude, he got 13
Yeah,
amazing letters, and he hung them on his walls, and like they, you know.
That's super cool.
I put it in a leather bound, got a custom leather, folder.
Yeah.
And just put all the letters in there, and he read them, and it was beautiful, man.
That's so cool.
So these letters are powerful. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
We'll get out of your way. And by the way, tomorrow I think we're riding to Hana.
Oh, very
and then
cool.
the next day I think we're gonna hike. If any time opens up for you and you wanna
how long
hang
are you
out,
here till?
Saturday.
Saturday. Like this Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay.
The 25th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday the 25th.
What's up?
Oh, hey, you're right.
I'm back. Great little call. So.
Hi.
Hey,
You're
Charles.
done. Yeah.
Hey, Tiger's gonna start reading Red Rising.